Arizona Territory, 1878. The setting sun painted the desert in shades of amber and gold as Hope Patterson stepped down from the stagecoach that had carried her to the dusty settlement of Whitethorn. At 22 years old, with golden blonde hair pinned neatly beneath a modest blue bonnet and wearing a travel-worn but respectable gray dress, she clutched her small valise tightly. The frontier town was to be her new home, a place where a young woman with teaching credentials might escape the suffocating expectations of Boston society following a broken engagement. Frontier towns need education more than fancy parlors need another ornament, her father had said when she announced her decision to accept the teaching position. Hope believed that with her whole heart, though she harbored a deeper conviction that the wild frontier offered no place for love, only purpose. After Thomas had abandoned her for a wealthier prospect, she had concluded that romance was a luxury ill-suited to practical living. Out here, she could dedicate herself entirely to something meaningful without the distraction of heartache. The town's welcome committee consisted solely of Mayor Guthrie, a portly man with a sweeping mustache who seemed relieved at her arrival. "Miss Patterson, thank the Lord you've made it. We feared you'd changed your mind about coming to our humble establishment." He gestured to the crudely painted building behind him. "The schoolhouse awaits your feminine touch. 12 children enrolled already, Apache, Mexican, and white alike." Hope's eyebrows rose. "Apache children?" "Yes, ma'am. Treaty terms. Part of the peace arrangement. The Army and Chief Nache agreed education would benefit relations." The mayor leaned closer. "Though I should warn you, there's also an Apache man who's requested reading lessons. 25 years old, he is. Calls himself Xander Greyhawk now. Raised by both his people and missionaries for a spell. Works as a scout for the Army sometimes. Came by 3 times asking when the new teacher would arrive." Hope's grip tightened on her valise. "I wasn't informed I'd be teaching adults. It's just the one. You can refuse if you wish, though it might complicate relations. He's peaceful enough, speaks English better than some of our own townsfolk. Just never learned to read proper." The mayor shrugged. The arrangement could be beneficial to community harmony. Hope considered the weight of expectation in the mayor's words. Her journey west was about purpose and independence, and what greater purpose than building bridges between worlds so often at war? "I'll consider it," she said finally. 3 days later, after settling into the small room behind the schoolhouse that served as her quarters, Hope organized her first classes. The children proved eager if undisciplined, and she quickly established routines. When the last child departed that afternoon, she began erasing the chalkboard, only to freeze at the sound of footsteps in the doorway. The man who stood there defied her expectations. Tall and broad-shouldered, he wore buckskin trousers and a white cotton shirt buttoned to the collar. His black hair was cut shorter than she'd anticipated, framing a face with high cheekbones and eyes that regarded her with measured intensity. A light stubble shadowed his jaw, and he held his hat respectfully in his hands. "Miss Patterson," he said, his voice rich and clear. "I am Xander Greyhawk. Mayor Guthrie informed me you might consider teaching me to read." Hope set down her chalk, acutely aware of how her pulse quickened. Whether from nervousness or something else, she couldn't say. "Mr. Greyhawk," she replied, maintaining her composure. "I understand you've been waiting for a teacher to arrive." "Yes." His directness was refreshing after the circuitous conversations she'd endured with Mayor Guthrie. "I can pay with game or assistance with repairs to the schoolhouse. The roof leaks in 3 places." Hope glanced up at the water stains on the ceiling. "You noticed that? I helped build this place 2 years ago. The contractor used green wood. It warped." He stepped inside, still maintaining a respectful distance. "Reading is important now. Treaties are written, not spoken. My people need someone who understands both worlds." The responsibility in his words resonated with her. Here was purpose incarnate, not teaching for mere academic advancement, but for survival. "We could arrange lessons 3 evenings a week," she found herself saying. As for payment, the roof repairs would be most welcome. Something shifted in his expression, not quite a smile, but a lightening. "Tomorrow evening, then?" Hope nodded, wondering if she'd made a prudent decision. Teaching an Apache man to read would raise eyebrows among certain townspeople, but the frontier demanded practical solutions over societal constraints. "Tomorrow evening," she confirmed. Their lessons began simply enough. Hope discovered Xander already knew the alphabet and basic phonetics from his time with missionaries, but lacked the guidance to progress further. His intelligence was evident in how quickly he grasped concepts, though his hands, strong hands accustomed to hunting and scouting, seemed awkward around a pencil. "You're frustrated?" Hope observed during their third lesson, when he struggled with a particular passage. "Words on paper are like tracks that vanish and reappear," he admitted. "Sometimes clear, sometimes not. Perhaps we're approaching this incorrectly." Hope selected a different book from her shelf, a collection of frontier tales. "Read this story aloud. Don't worry about every word. Follow the meaning like you would follow a trail." Xander's progress accelerated after that. Over the following weeks, as autumn crept across the desert, their lessons evolved into discussions. He repaired the roof as promised, and when winter winds brought unexpected chill, he appeared one evening with firewood and knowledge of how to adjust the stove for maximum heat. "Where did you learn that?" Hope asked, watching him arrange the wood. "My father was a skilled hunter, but he also learned metalwork from Mexican traders," Xander explained. "He believed in taking useful knowledge from all sources." "Is he still alive?" A shadow passed over Xander's face. "No. Soldiers killed him during a misunderstanding 8 years ago. They claimed he was raiding. He was hunting deer." The raw pain in his voice opened something in Hope. "I lost my mother to fever when I was 16, she offered. "Father sent me to finishing school afterward. I think he couldn't bear to look at me. I resemble her greatly." Xander studied her face. "That is why you came west. To escape memories?" "Partly," she admitted. "And partly to escape a future that suddenly seemed insufficient." "The broken engagement," he said quietly. Hope startled. "How did you people talk?" "I listen." He arranged the last piece of wood. "The mayor's wife believes you came west to heal a broken heart." Heat rose in Hope's cheeks. Mrs. Guthrie should mind her own affairs. Was she wrong? Hope found herself unable to manufacture the polite deflection she would have offered anyone else. "No," she said finally. "Though I would say it was not my heart that broke, but my illusions." Xander nodded, understanding in his eyes. Illusions can be more dangerous than lies. They come from within. That night, Hope wrote in her journal about the peculiar comfort of speaking honestly with someone who existed outside the social structures that had constrained her all her life. What freedom there was in conversation without pretense. As winter deepened, the snow isolating Whitethorn from larger settlements, Hope found herself looking forward to their evening sessions with increasing anticipation. Xander now read fluently, their lessons evolving into shared readings and discussions. He brought historical questions that challenged her Eastern education, while she introduced him to Shakespeare and Dickens. One evening, as a blizzard howled outside, Xander arrived with a troubling report. 3 children from the Apache camp haven't returned from gathering pine nuts, he said, his breath clouding in the cold as he stamped snow from his boots. Their parents are searching, but the storm makes tracking difficult. Hope immediately began gathering blankets. "We should help." "It's dangerous," Xander cautioned. "The temperature drops quickly after sunset." "They're my students," Hope said firmly. "Lily, Thomas, and Sarah. If they're lost in this weather." Xander studied her with newfound respect. "You remember their Apache names too?" "Of course," Hope replied, wrapping her heaviest shawl around her shoulders. "They told me what they wished to be called. I honor that." Together they ventured into the storm, Xander leading with uncanny confidence despite the swirling snow. They found the children huddled beneath an overhang 2 miles from town, cold but unharmed. Lily had twisted her ankle, preventing their return. Hope watched as Xander spoke gently to the frightened children in their native tongue before lifting little Lily onto his back. The boy, Thomas, clutched Hope's hand as they made their slow journey back to the settlement. When they finally delivered the children safely to their worried parents at the edge of town, Hope witnessed something transformative, the gratitude that transcended the usual wariness between settlers and Apache. In that moment, standing in the snow with her hair escaping its pins and her dress sodden with melted ice, Hope felt the false barriers of her upbringing crumbling. The following day, whispers circulated about the schoolteacher venturing into a blizzard with an Apache man. It was inappropriate, Mrs. Guthrie informed Hope after Sunday service, her thin lips pinched with disapproval. A single woman should not place herself in such compromising situations. 3 children might have frozen to death. Hope replied evenly. I hardly think propriety outweighs their lives. Nevertheless, the older woman continued. Your reputation is precious currency in a frontier town. There is already talk about your private lessons with that man. That evening, when Xander arrived, Hope noticed the stiffness in his demeanor. You've heard the gossip, she said, arranging books on her desk with unnecessary precision. Yes. He remained standing just inside the door. Perhaps we should end our lessons. Your position here is important. To whom? Hope asked, surprised by the sharpness in her own voice. To the Guthries? To people who would prefer I let children perish rather than be seen alone with you. To the children who need education, Xander replied quietly. Both Apache and White. You bridge worlds, Hope. That matters more than our reading Shakespeare. The use of her first name, never spoken between them before, hung in the air. We've progressed beyond reading lessons, Hope admitted, finally meeting his gaze. Haven't we? The question contained multitudes, acknowledgement of friendship, of intellectual companionship, perhaps of something more dangerous still. Yes, Xander answered simply. That is why I should not return. And if I disagree? Then you risk what you came here to build. His expression softened. I will not be the reason you lose your purpose. After he left, Hope sat alone in the schoolhouse, contemplating the curious pain in her chest. She had come west believing the frontier offered no place for love, only purpose. Now she wondered if she had been entirely wrong about both. February brought an unexpected visitor to Whitethorn. Captain Edward Rogers arrived with military dispatches and took rooms at the town's small hotel. His presence caused a stir, particularly when he began attending church services and paying special attention to the schoolteacher. A fine match, Mrs. Guthrie declared over tea, which Hope had reluctantly agreed to attend. Captain Rogers comes from an excellent Virginia family. He's expressed particular interest in your background, Miss Patterson. Hope stirred her tea, discomfort settling in her stomach. Has he indeed? He admires educated women, Mrs. Guthrie continued. And a military wife with your refinement would be an asset at any frontier post. That evening, during her now-resumed lessons with Xander, which she had insisted continue despite gossip, she mentioned the captain's arrival. I've encountered him before, Xander said, his tone carefully neutral as he turned a page in his book. During treaty negotiations. Is he fair? Hope asked. He follows orders, Xander replied. Sometimes those orders are fair. The following week, Captain Rogers requested permission to observe Hope's classroom. His crisp blue uniform and authoritative presence captivated the children, though Hope noticed her Apache students grew quiet and watchful. Impressive work, Miss Patterson, the captain commented afterward. Though I wonder if your curriculum might benefit from greater emphasis on patriotic literature. These children, especially the natives, should understand the greatness of the nation encompassing them. They understand their own histories quite well, Hope replied. I believe education should expand, not replace. The captain's smile tightened. A romantic notion. May I escort you to dinner this evening? The hotel cook has prepared something special. Hope found herself accepting, partially from curiosity about his interest and partially from a desire to understand the military perspective shaping frontier policy. During dinner, Rogers spoke eloquently about Eastern culture and the inevitable progress of civilization westward. The native populations must adapt or perish, he stated between bites of beefsteak. It's the natural order. Your work civilizing their young is commendable. I wouldn't characterize it as civilizing, Hope objected. Education is an exchange. I learn as much from them as they from me. Rogers laughed indulgently. A charming perspective, if impractical. I understand you've been instructing an Apache man as well. The question carried subtle weight. Yes, Hope answered carefully. He's quite intelligent. Xander Greyhawk, Rogers nodded. A useful interpreter at times, though his loyalties remain complex. I would caution against developing any particular attachment. His people may be relocated to a reservation further south by summer. Hope set down her fork. Relocated? But there's a treaty. Treaties evolve with circumstances, Miss Patterson. Rogers smiled thinly. Silver has been discovered near their current lands. Progress demands certain adjustments. Later that night, unable to sleep, Hope considered the captain's warning, both about the relocation and about her attachment to Xander. The implication troubled her deeply. Had her feelings become so transparent? When Xander arrived for his lesson the following evening, Hope shared the captain's information about the planned relocation. Is it true? She asked. Xander's expression darkened. There have been rumors. Nothing official. Would you go? I exist between worlds, he said after a long pause. The Apache see me as too influenced by white ways. Whites see me as forever Apache. Where I go matters less than what I do with the knowledge I have. He met her gaze directly. This is why reading matters. To understand the treaties they break, the laws they change. Then we must ensure you have every advantage, Hope said with sudden determination, pushing the grammar text aside and retrieving legal documents from her desk. These are land claim filings and territorial statutes. More relevant than poetry now. Xander studied her face. Captain Rogers has taken an interest in you. The observation contained a question Hope wasn't prepared to answer directly. He has taken an interest in controlling the narrative of this territory, she replied. As have most who come west representing government authority. And what narrative do you wish to create here? Hope Patterson. The question struck her core. What indeed? She had come west believing she sought purpose instead of love, yet found herself increasingly questioning whether the two must be separate. One where education creates understanding rather than erasure, she answered finally. One where different worlds might meet with respect. Their eyes held, and Hope felt the dangerous territory they approached. Territory where the frontier's harsh realities and her own guarded heart intersected. The arrival of spring brought multiple changes to Whitethorn. Captain Rogers extended his stay, citing administrative duties but spending conspicuous time at the schoolhouse. Meanwhile, government surveyors appeared, marking boundaries that encroached on traditional Apache gathering grounds. Tension in the settlement grew palpable. Xander's visits to town became less frequent, though he maintained their lesson schedule with rigid consistency. Hope noticed how townsfolk watched him with increasing suspicion, whispering when he passed. They fear what they don't understand. Hope remarked one evening as they reviewed a particularly complex legal document regarding water rights. They fear because they've been told to fear, Xander corrected. Fear serves those who want my people removed. Captain Rogers appeared in the schoolhouse doorway before Hope could respond. His expression hardened at the sight of them sitting together at her desk, reading from the same document. Miss Patterson, he greeted coolly. Mr. Greyhawk. Xander stood. Captain. I wasn't aware your lessons continued so late into the evening, Rogers commented, stepping inside uninvited. Legal language requires particular attention, Hope replied, maintaining her composure. Rogers' gaze fell to the documents. Territorial statutes? Curious curriculum for basic literacy. Knowledge is its own justification, Hope said, rising to stand beside Xander. Was there something specific you needed, Captain? Merely concerned for your safety, Rogers replied smoothly. There have been reports of unrest among the Apache camps. Certain elements resist the proposed relocation. Perhaps because relocation violates their treaty rights, Xander said quietly. Roger's smile didn't reach his eyes. Treaties reflect moments in time, Mr. Greyhawk. Circumstances evolve. As does our understanding of justice, Hope interjected. If you'll excuse us, Captain, we were in the middle of our lesson. After Rogers departed, Xander gathered his things with unusual haste. He will create problems for you. I'm not afraid of Edward Rogers, Hope insisted. Perhaps you should be. Xander paused at the door. There will be a council meeting tomorrow night. The elders are discussing options. Some favor resistance. Will there be fighting? Hope asked, sudden fear clutching at her throat. I argue for negotiation, but voices for confrontation grow stronger. His expression softened. You should know I filed a land claim under the Homestead Act, using what you taught me. Land that borders both territories, a place between worlds. The implication struck Hope with unexpected force. A permanent claim to remain, regardless of tribal relocation. A declaration of independence and intention. That's wonderful, she managed, though the word seemed insufficient. Xander studied her face. Knowledge creates possibilities. He hesitated, then added, be careful around Rogers. He sees only what he wishes to possess. The following day, Hope found herself distracted during lessons, her thoughts repeatedly turning to Xander's land claim and the meaning behind it. When school concluded, Captain Rogers waited outside with a buggy. I thought you might appreciate a drive before dinner, he announced. The desert blooms are spectacular this time of year. Declining would only raise questions Hope preferred not to answer. She accepted his hand into the buggy, maintaining a proper distance on the seat. As they drove, Rogers spoke of his ambitions, a promotion to major, perhaps a posting to Washington eventually. A man in such a position requires a suitable wife, he remarked, his intention unmistakable. Someone of refined background, yet practical frontier experience. Hope watched the desert landscape passing by, noticing how the captain avoided Apache encampments during their drive. Two separate worlds, deliberately kept apart. "You've been unusually quiet, Miss Patterson," Rogers observed as they approached a remote viewpoint overlooking the valley. "I'm considering the responsibilities education brings," Hope replied. "Teaching someone to read creates obligation to ensure they can use that knowledge justly." An interesting perspective. Rogers halted the buggy. "Though I wonder if you've considered the consequences of your particular tutorial choices." Hope turned to face him directly. "What consequences would those be?" "Encouraging unrealistic aspirations." Rogers' tone hardened. "Your Apache student has filed for homestead land using knowledge you provided. Land specifically identified for development." The deliberate nature of his wording struck Hope with sudden clarity. "You've been monitoring our lessons." "I've been protecting territorial interests," Rogers corrected. "The schoolteacher fraternizing with a native, teaching him to circumvent progress. It creates complications." "Teaching someone to read is fraternizing now?" Hope challenged, anger rising. "Or is it his use of that reading that troubles you?" "What troubles me," Rogers said, his voice dangerously soft, "is watching an educated woman from good family throw away her prospects on misguided sympathy. The Apache will be relocated. Greyhawk's claim will be contested and denied. That's inevitable. Your future, however, remains undetermined." He reached for her hand, which Hope promptly withdrew. "My future is my own to determine, Captain Rogers." "Is it?" His smile didn't reach his eyes. "A woman alone on the frontier has limited options. I offer respectable partnership. Consider carefully before declining." The implied threat hung between them as Rogers turned the buggy homeward, the desert blooms suddenly seeming less vibrant than before. That night, Hope heard commotion in the town square. Peering through her window, she saw soldiers arriving, Rogers directing their movements with grim efficiency. Something about their purposeful arrangement suggested preparation rather than routine patrol. A soft knock at her back door startled her. She found Lily's mother waiting in the shadows. "Miss Teacher," the woman whispered urgently. "Soldiers plan to arrest Xander Greyhawk at dawn. They claim he incites resistance. You must warn him." "Where is he?" Hope asked, already reaching for her shawl. "At his new land building." The woman pressed a crude map into Hope's hand. "Go quickly." Hope hesitated only long enough to change into her sturdiest boots and dress before slipping out into the desert night. Following the map led her through unfamiliar terrain, the journey taking nearly 2 hours by moonlight. She found Xander laying foundation stones for a small cabin, working by lantern light despite the late hour. "Hope!" He straightened in surprise as she emerged from the darkness. "What are you?" "They're coming for you," she interrupted, breathless from her hurried journey. "Rogers has ordered your arrest at dawn. They're claiming you're organizing resistance." Xander set down the stone he'd been positioning. "Are they wrong?" The question caught Hope unprepared. "You are organizing resistance?" "I am organizing discussion," he clarified. "But to men like Rogers, Apache voices raised in any protest sound like war cries." He gestured to the foundation stones. "This is my answer. Legal claim, legal structure, legal residence. Using their laws against them." Hope studied what he'd built. Not just a foundation, but the beginning of a life. "It's not just about staying, is it? It's about belonging on your own terms." "Yes." Xander approached her slowly. "Why did you come tonight, Hope?" "You risked much." The directness of his question demanded equal honesty. "Because I couldn't bear the thought of you in chains. Because what you're building here matters. Because," she faltered, then continued more softly, "because I've spent months teaching you to read, while you've taught me to see." "And what do you see now?" he asked, standing close enough that she could feel the warmth of him in the desert night. "That I came west believing the frontier had no place for love, only purpose," Hope answered, her voice steady despite her racing heart. "I was wrong. They're not separate at all." For a moment, Time seemed suspended between them. Then Xander reached up, hesitantly, to touch her cheek. In both our worlds, this brings consequences. I'm aware, Hope whispered, covering his hand with hers. Their first kiss felt like crossing a boundary more significant than any territorial line. Tender, questioning, then deepening with shared certainty. Dawn was approaching when they finally formed a plan. Hope would return to town to gather evidence of the treaty violations, while Xander would visit neighboring Apache families to organize a legal petition rather than armed resistance. Be careful, Hope urged as they prepared to part. Rogers is dangerous. As am I, when protecting what matters, Xander replied, touching her face once more. Return to the schoolhouse. Maintain your routine. I'll send word when it's safe to meet. Hope reluctantly headed back toward town, her mind racing with both fear and newfound clarity. She had crossed a threshold from which there could be no retreat, nor did she wish for one. She arrived at the schoolhouse just as the town was waking, slipping inside unnoticed. Hours later, as she taught her morning lessons, the door burst open. Captain Rogers entered, flanked by 2 soldiers. Miss Patterson, he announced, you'll need to dismiss your class. There's a matter requiring your immediate attention. The children looked to her uncertainly. Hope maintained her composure. We're in the middle of arithmetic, Captain. Perhaps after lunch would be more convenient. Roger's expression hardened. Now, Miss Patterson. Hope nodded to the children. Class dismissed. Please read Chapter 7 for tomorrow. When the last child had gone, Rogers closed the door. You were seen leaving town last night, he stated without preamble. And returning this morning. Hope met his gaze steadily. I wasn't aware my movements required military approval. They do when they involve warning a suspected agitator. Rogers approached her desk. Where is Greyhawk? I couldn't say. Couldn't or won't. Rogers' voice took on a dangerous edge. Consider your position carefully, Miss Patterson. Aiding and abetting resistance against government operations has serious consequences. Hope's hands trembled slightly, but her voice remained firm. What government operations? Forcing people from lands guaranteed by treaty? That seems worthy of resistance through legal means, which is precisely what Mr. Greyhawk is pursuing. Legal means, Rogers echoed with contempt. A convenient fiction. We found documents in his dwelling. Copies of territorial statutes with annotations, lists of affected families, maps of contested boundaries. He leaned closer. Your handwriting was identified on several pages. Hope felt cold fear spreading through her. Teaching someone to understand the law is not a crime. Conspiracy against territorial administration is, Rogers countered. You have a choice, Miss Patterson. Cooperate by revealing Greyhawk's location, or face charges yourself. Your teaching career would end. Your reputation would be destroyed. Your father in Boston would be devastated. The threat struck its intended target, yet something had fundamentally shifted within Hope. The woman who had arrived in Whitethorn believing love was an unaffordable luxury had discovered something worth far more than reputation or security. My father taught me that principles matter most when they're costly to maintain, she said quietly. I have nothing further to say, Captain. Roger's face darkened. Then I have no choice but to place you under house arrest pending further investigation. You'll remain here under guard until Greyhawk is apprehended. After Rogers stationed a soldier outside the schoolhouse door, Hope sat at her desk, mind racing through limited options. Night fell, and with it came unexpected opportunity in the form of young Thomas, who appeared at her window after sunset. Miss Teacher, he whispered, Xander says to give you this. He passed a folded paper through the partially open window before disappearing into the darkness. Hope unfolded the note with trembling fingers. Petition with 23 signatures delivered to Territorial Governor. Legal counsel secured in Santa Fe. Rogers' orders being reviewed. Hold strong. Friends will come at midnight. Hope folded the note into her pocket, hope flaring within her. For the first time, she allowed herself to imagine a future different from anything she had planned. One where purpose and love weren't competing forces, but complementary strengths. At midnight precisely, a commotion erupted in the town square. Hope heard shouts, then the pounding of hooves. Her guard abandoned his post to investigate, leaving her momentarily unattended. Within seconds, the back door opened to reveal Xander and 2 other men. Quickly, he urged, taking her hand. The territorial inspector arrived with the governor's representative. Rogers is being questioned about unauthorized military action. Hope grabbed only her most essential belongings before following him into the darkness. They rode double on his horse, traveling swiftly through the desert night to a hidden canyon where several Apache families had gathered. The petition worked? Hope asked as they dismounted. Combined with evidence of mining interests bribing officials, Xander explained. The governor wants no scandal. He's ordered a review of the relocation plan and suspended Rogers pending investigation. Hope sagged with relief. Then it's over? Not entirely, Xander cautioned. There will be other Rogers, other plans. But we've won time and attention. He took her hands in his. Hope Patterson, I must ask something difficult of you. Ask, she said simply. The life I offer has no guarantees. My land claim may be contested. My position between worlds brings constant challenge. The path would be easier if you returned east. Hope studied his face in the moonlight. Is that what you want? I want what brings you happiness and safety, he answered honestly. Then you should know that I found both when I stopped hiding from love behind purpose, Hope replied. The frontier has taught me they're one and the same when your heart is fully engaged. 3 months later, beneath an azure Arizona sky, Hope Patterson became Hope Greyhawk in a ceremony that blended Apache traditions with Christian elements. The territorial governor's representative attended, appointed political statement ensuring their protection. Mayor Guthrie officiated, his initial reluctance overcome by his wife's surprising change of heart after witnessing Hope's principled stand. Their homestead grew steadily. A sturdy cabin expanded room by room, a garden coaxing improbable bounty from desert soil. Hope continued teaching, converting their front room into a school where both children and adults, Apache and settler alike, gathered to learn. Xander's position evolved from Army Scout to official territorial interpreter and eventually to appointed liaison between native leaders and government officials. His reading skills, and Hope's guidance in navigating legal language, proved instrumental in challenging unjust policies and protecting tribal rights. One evening, as they sat on their porch watching sunset paint the desert in gold, Hope leaned against her husband's shoulder. Do you remember when I told you I came west believing the frontier had no place for love? She asked. Xander smiled, his hand finding hers. I remember thinking you were wrong even then. I was wrong about many things, Hope acknowledged. I thought purpose meant building walls around your heart. Instead, I found that true purpose breaks them down. She gestured to their homestead, the garden where Apache medicinal plants grew alongside eastern flowers, the school where children of different worlds learned side by side. This is the narrative we've created, she continued. Not mine or yours, but ours. A place between worlds where both can exist together. Xander kissed her forehead gently. You came to teach reading and found everything I wasn't looking for, Hope finished. And everything I needed. As stars appeared above their shared creation, Hope reflected on how thoroughly her false belief had been transformed. The frontier wasn't merely a place for love, it demanded it. Here, where survival required cooperation and understanding across differences, love wasn't luxury, but necessity. In teaching an Apache man to read, she had learned the most important lesson of all, that the strongest foundations are built where different worlds meet, not in the safety of separation, but in the courage of connection.